Project Hellcrap coming along slowly. It's getting towards the final stage of the build, which is where the mistakes start to happen. I've been rushing, kind of short on time working on it, but a few things I did. I'm gonna see if this works. I think it's going to. I got a expansion tank that I wanted to run instead of just a typical overflow. So the benefit to the expansion tank is that it actively de-aerates the system. So you have air, there's a steam vent, and the steam vent usually comes from the second highest point in the system, which in this case is the radiator, which I'll get to in a minute. And then it feeds up to here, which is the highest point in the system. So any steam that accumulates, any air that accumulates in the system will vent out of here because this is open now, unlike an overflow tank where there's a spring-loaded radiator cap. The way I'm running this is open and this is pressurized. So this air will come out to here, move to the highest point in the system, which is the expansion tank, and then the expansion tank is only filled up so much, and then air bleeds out the top. So the air, it basically, expansion tanks regulate pressure better, and it's more consistent pressure through the system, and it gets rid of air in the system constantly. It's constantly burping it. The only issue is that because this is the highest point in the system, what you're really supposed to do is weld a fitting somewhere into the radiator for the steam vent. And I really didn't feel like doing that at this point. Everything's all together. So what I did was there's a petcock here for the typical overflow. Then there's the radiator cap. Normally the radiator cap has a lower seal with a spring, and the lower seal lifts as the spring pushes up on it, and that's what pushes fluid out the overflow when it builds up too much pressure. That seal is the same seal and the same surface area and the same thickness as this seal. It's just smaller and it's spring-loaded. So in theory, this seal is also sealing the radiator, because if you have an overflow tank on a regular radiator, when this pushes up and lets fluid into here, this upper seal is still stopping it from burping out the radiator itself. Otherwise, you'd be burping, cooling out the radiator. What's the point of having an overflow tank? So my theory was that I cut that lower seal off, and now I just have this upper seal, which basically pushes down using these two tabs, and we'll see what happens, but I think it's gonna work. It's kind of a cheap way of doing it, but we'll see what happens. Getting onto other things, I had some clearance issues with the water manifold temp sensor. As you can see, I got an old broken one that came off the pull-out just to test fit it, and I realized that with a straight-out fitting here, it was never going to work. So I got a little bit of a 45 degree, it's a 3/8 NPT pipe thread, and this clocked it just right. So now this whole thing with the sensor on it, you could see, will clear the firewall perfectly. That's one thing. I bled the brakes, but I think I still have to do a little bit better job because I didn't have somebody with me. I was using a vacuum bleeder, a power bleeder, but I don't like using the reservoir up top because if it overfills, it'll spill everywhere. So I probably need somebody else with me to feed it because I think I ran it dry. This is something that I've been working on, is the dash. It's a complete mess, but I don't know how else to do this with the roll cage the way I wanted to run the roll cage to give maximum clearance for the head and everything. I had to run it through the dash. So, and then I want to be able to still make the dash removable because all my wiring harness and ECU and TCM and everything's under there. So I want to be able to pull this out very easily. So the only way that I could think of doing it was to cut out notches over there, and I welded these like shelves, because under this dash pad is like a metal piece that this dash pad adheres to. So I welded these little shelves, so now there's studs here and here. So now when these go down and the studs tighten, the shelf kind of keeps it flush. But I got to figure out a way to kind of cap all of this to make it look good in a way where I could still remove it. Because as of now, I could pull this whole thing out and it's easily removable, but it looks terrible. So I'm going to need to put something over it. This is basically just going to be like the structure. Then I'm going to do some kind of a soft pad, or maybe like a regular like year one dash cap, and then use like Velcro to hold it on, and maybe slice there so you could kind of bend it and walk it out. But I'll figure that when the time comes. It's just that's been a little bit of an issue. You can see like on the sides here and everything, I'm gonna have to figure out better ways to make that all flush and fit, but it's definitely getting there. I got the seats in. That was a pretty big pain in the ass because I did lower the floor I notched the floor out on both sides to lower these seats down, so they sit much better with the roll cage and everything with the height of the car, because the factory car has very low seats. But I didn't want to use like a racing seat that was uncomfortable. So these are Corbeau, don't know how to pronounce them, Corbio Trail Cats. They have the cutouts, they have the anti-submarine belt cutout, and the shoulder belt cutouts. And then when I welded the cage up, I welded those little separators. The problem I had with the anti-submarine belt is because the seat sits so low now, I made a bracket that's basically flat to the floor, and the seat and the floor was lowered, so you only had so much room to fit that anti-submarine belt and the anti-submarine belt mount. And I was having a lot of trouble with getting it in a place where I could adjust it, because obviously for different people sitting in the seats, you really want to adjust that. It's really more important for me. I mean, passenger, it's important too, but I'd be very careful when I'm driving with passengers in the car. I'm not going to be racing it. But I finally got it right. I mounted them behind the seat. These seats are sliders, so you could slide the seat forward, and this way I could get to that and adjust it and pull it tighter or looser. Only downside is this is about as loose as it goes, but I think that's pretty good unless you're like 300 pounds. It should be close to the right spot where it's bearing the weight of the lap belts on your hips. Let me move around to... Oh, and one thing about that was another mistake I made. I was in a rush when I was drilling the holes for the anti-submarine belt. Go figure, out of the entire floor of the car, that was the half-inch space where the fuel line was running through, and I drilled right through the center of the fuel line. So I got to do a new fuel line now, but I'm kind of happy because I got that PTFE from Hot Rod Fuel Hose. I never used them before, and it's kind of cheap compared to the Racetronics I'm used to using for the PTFE hose. That was very like brittle and kind of kinked when you tried to bend it. So I'm actually happy about that, because I kind of wanted to ditch it anyway. So here's more of the dash work and the corner work that I'm going to have to finish up on. I got the flat screen in. You could see the rally gauges and everything that I have, but I have the non-rally switches. Fire that up, Dakota Digital. Again, that's the beeping from the warning light, because I don't have anything set up yet. This is the center console. So I was working with this. I used Kydex and molded it, and then screwed that all around, and then finished it with epoxy. And now I just have to paint it so that bumps out for the 8HP90 shifter. And it's pretty much it for now.